That's what happens when you let the help bring their kids to work, Richard Whitmore sneered, his voice carrying across the elegant conference room as he stared at the spilled water on his Italian suit. The 17-year-old girl froze, her dark hands still clutching the empty glass, eyes wide with shock. Typical. Can't even serve water properly. Camille Johnson stood, trembling, mortified as laughter erupted from the Whitmore family members seated around the massive mahogany table. Her father, Marcus Johnson, CEO of Horizon Innovations, remained perfectly still at the head of the table, his face a mask of controlled fury as the document folder containing the $750 million 0-cents acquisition offer sat untouched between them. "Richard," Marcus said quietly, pressing a button on his desk phone, "you just made the biggest mistake of your financial life." Have you ever witnessed someone's arrogance destroy everything they wanted in a single moment of cruelty? 2 hours earlier. The alarm clock read 5:30 a.m. when Marcus Johnson opened his eyes in the spacious master bedroom of his Oakland Hills home. The wall of windows overlooked the San Francisco Bay, the early morning fog still clinging to the water. Marcus had been up late reviewing the final details of the acquisition deal that would cement his company's place in tech history. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the hallway as he padded barefoot toward the kitchen. NPR played softly from the built-in speakers, delivering the morning business news. On the refrigerator hung childhood drawings, academic awards, and a recent acceptance letter from MIT addressed to Camille Johnson. "Morning, Dad." Camille looked up from her calculus homework, already dressed in the navy blue skirt and white blouse she'd selected for her visit to the office. "I made you coffee. Black, 1 sugar?" Marcus smiled at his daughter, pride filling his chest. "Thanks, Cammy. You didn't have to get up this early." "I wanted to. Today's important." She pushed a plate of whole-grain toast toward him. "Besides, when's the next time I'll get to see a $750 million deal signed?" Marcus nodded, taking a sip of the perfectly prepared coffee. A photograph on the counter showed a younger Marcus with his late wife, Michelle, holding baby Camille at the hospital. It had been 12 years since breast cancer had taken Michelle, leaving Marcus to raise their daughter alone. The pain had dulled, but the responsibility had only grown. "You know you don't have to come," Marcus said, straightening his tie. "These meetings can drag on." "Dad, I'm going to run my own company someday. This is better than any business class." Camille closed her textbook. "Besides, you promised Mom you'd show me everything about the business world." "Good and bad." Marcus nodded. Michelle had been determined that their daughter would face no artificial limits, that she would understand the challenges of being both black and female in the corporate world, but also have the confidence to overcome them. His phone buzzed. A text from Maya Washington, his chief of staff. "Secretary Ross called. He wants an update on the job's impact after the announcement." Marcus smiled slightly, having the labor secretary's personal interest in today's deal was just one indicator of Horizon's growing influence. The drive to San Francisco took them across the Bay Bridge, just as sunrise painted the city gold. Marcus pointed out landmarks to Camille, though she'd seen them countless times. "That's where I had my first job interview after college. They told me I wasn't the right fit for their culture. And now you're buying companies bigger than they ever were," Camille finished, having heard the story many times. As they pulled into the underground parking at Horizon Tower, a security guard nodded respectfully. "Morning, Mr. Johnson. Big day today." "Morning, Robert." "You remember my daughter, Camille?" "Of course. The future CEO herself." Robert smiled broadly. "Your father tells me MIT is lucky to have you this fall." Camille blushed slightly. "Thank you, sir." The elevator carried them to the executive floor where Maya waited, tablet in hand. "Morning, Marcus." "Hello, Camille. It's wonderful to see you." She handed Marcus a folder. "The latest projections show we'll create 1,200 jobs in the first year after acquisition, not the 800 we initially estimated." The labor secretary was pleased. Marcus nodded, flipping through the documents. The Whitmore Technologies acquisition had been methodically planned for 18 months. The family-owned semiconductor company had pioneering technology but outdated management. The Whitmores needed Horizon's global reach and vision. Horizon needed their patents and manufacturing capabilities. "The Whitmores are already here," Maya said quietly. "Richard insisted on bringing his entire family. His wife, brother, and son are all in the conference room." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "All 4 of them?" We agreed this would be principals only until the final signing. Maya shrugged slightly. He said it's a family business and they make decisions as a family. Are there any new concerns I should know about? Marcus asked, sensing tension in Maya's expression. Nothing concrete, but... She hesitated. Their counsel has been asking for additional guarantees about the family's continued role post-acquisition. Nothing in writing, just conversations with our legal team. Marcus nodded, processing this information. The Whitmores had founded their company in 1978, but while their technology remained exceptional, their business practices were rooted in another era. Richard Whitmore had inherited the company from his father and expected his son, Richard Jr., to eventually take the reins, despite the young man's apparent lack of interest or aptitude. As they approached the conference room, Marcus placed a hand on Camille's shoulder. Remember what I told you about these situations. Observe everything, speak only when necessary, and... Never let them see when their comments hurt, Camille finished. I know, Dad. That's my girl. Marcus straightened his tie, put on his professional smile, and opened the conference room doors. Inside, the Whitmore family turned as one. Richard Sr., in his 60s with silver hair and a tennis tan, stood at the head of the table, a position typically reserved for the host. His wife Catherine, blonde and preserved through decades of expensive procedures, gave a tight smile. Richard Jr., about 25, barely looked up from his phone. Thomas Whitmore, Richard's younger brother and the company's CTO, at least had the courtesy to stand. Marcus, finally, Richard said, checking his watch, though they were precisely on time. We were beginning to wonder if you were having second thoughts. His gaze shifted to Camille, a brief look of confusion crossing his face. No second thoughts, Richard, Marcus said smoothly, extending his hand. I'm looking forward to finalizing our agreement. I believe you know Maya Washington, my chief of staff, and this is my daughter Camille, who's joining us as part of her business education before she heads to MIT this fall. Richard took Marcus's hand with a limp grip. Ah, take your daughter to work day? How nice. I wasn't aware we were bringing children to this meeting. He didn't bother introducing his own family members. Thomas Whitmore stepped forward. It's a pleasure, Marcus. And congratulations on MIT, Camille. That's impressive. Unlike his brother, Thomas seemed genuinely respectful. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore, Camille replied politely. As everyone took their seats, a catering assistant quietly arranged water glasses and coffee service. Marcus noticed Richard Jr. openly staring at Camille, a smirk playing on his lips as he whispered something to his mother. Maya opened her laptop and displayed the day's agenda on the wall screen. We've allocated 3 hours for final review of the agreement, followed by the formal signing at 11:30. The press release is scheduled for noon, with a joint media appearance at 12:30. Richard Sr. waved his hand dismissively. I think we can speed this up. We've all reviewed the documents. Unless there are any major changes, we should be able to sign within the hour. Marcus kept his expression neutral. There are still some details to discuss, particularly around the integration plan for your engineering team and the patent transfer process. Details my lawyers can handle, Richard said. The important thing is the price. $750 million, 0 cents is agreed, yes? That's correct, Marcus confirmed, noting how Richard reduced 18 months of complex negotiation to a single number. Thomas leaned forward. Marcus, I've been working with your CTO on transition plans for the engineering teams. We have some concerns about maintaining the culture that's made our innovation possible. Before Marcus could respond, Richard cut in. Culture can be addressed later. The main point is that the Whitmore family maintains its position of influence. Our name still means something in this industry. Maya glanced at Marcus, confirming his earlier concerns about the family's expectations. Your reputation in semiconductor design is precisely why this acquisition makes sense, Marcus said diplomatically. But Horizon has its own corporate culture that has proven successful. Integration requires blending the best of both companies. Catherine Whitmore spoke for the first time, her voice carrying a hint of Northeastern prep school. What my husband means is that certain traditions must be respected. The Whitmore name has stood for excellence for 3 generations. Marcus nodded politely, though he recognized the subtext. Throughout the negotiations, the Whitmores had made subtle and not-so-subtle references to their legacy and traditions, code words that often masked resistance to diverse leadership. Perhaps we should review the executive organization chart post-acquisition, Maya suggested, pulling up a slide that showed the integrated management structure. Richard's face tightened as he saw that his son was not placed in senior leadership, while Thomas was given a significant position leading R&D. This is unacceptable, Richard said flatly. Richard Jr. should be heading product strategy at minimum. He has an MBA from Wharton. Marcus kept his voice level. Our organization is based on merit and experience. Richard Jr. is welcome to apply for any position where he meets the qualifications. Apply? Catherine's voice rose slightly. A Whitmore doesn't apply for positions in his own company. After today, it won't be your company anymore, Marcus stated plainly. That's what an acquisition means. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Richard Sr. leaned back, studying Marcus with new eyes. I think we need to revisit some fundamental aspects of this deal, starting with the family's ongoing role. The catering assistant returned, offering to refill water glasses. As she approached Camille, the young woman smiled and reached for a pitcher. I can help, Camille offered. Let the staff do their job, Marcus said gently. Actually, Camille said, I was going to get some water for everyone. Would anyone like a refill? Catherine raised an eyebrow but pushed her glass forward. Richard Jr. finally looked up from his phone, watching with amusement as Camille stood to serve water. What happened next would change everything. As Camille carefully poured water into the glasses, she moved around the table with quiet confidence. When she reached Richard Whitmore Sr., he shifted suddenly, causing her to spill water on his expensive suit. That's what happens when you let the help bring their kids to work, Richard sneered, his voice carrying across the elegant conference room. Typical. Can't even serve water properly. The room fell silent. Camille stood frozen, the water pitcher still in her hands, her eyes wide with shock. The casual cruelty of the comment hung in the air like poison. Maya's sharp intake of breath was the only sound for several seconds. Thomas Whitmore looked mortified while Catherine and Richard Jr. exchanged smirks. Marcus's expression remained perfectly composed, though a muscle in his jaw twitched almost imperceptibly. He pressed a button on his desk phone. Patricia, would you please come in? The doors opened immediately as Patricia Chen, Horizon's general counsel, entered. She must have been waiting nearby, a precaution Marcus had arranged without telling anyone. Mr. Johnson? Patricia asked professionally. Patricia, please escort Camille to my office and stay with her. Then contact the board members on the acquisition committee. Tell them we need an emergency conference call in 10 minutes. Camille hesitated, looking at her father with concern. Marcus gave her a reassuring nod. It's okay, Cammy. I'll handle this. As Camille and Patricia left the room, Richard sighed dramatically, dabbing at his suit with a monogrammed handkerchief. Really, Marcus, there's no need for such theatrics. It was just a little water and a harmless comment. Perhaps if the girl had been properly trained— Stop talking, Marcus said, his voice quiet, but carrying an authority that instantly silenced the room. What you just did was not only unacceptable on a human level, but it has destroyed any possibility of a business relationship between our companies. Richard's face reddened. You can't be serious. You're going to jeopardize a $750 million 0-cents deal over a spilled glass of water? No, Marcus replied, standing slowly. I'm terminating this acquisition because you just revealed exactly who you are and what kind of culture you've built. The comment you made to my 17-year-old daughter wasn't about spilled water. It was about seeing her as the help, despite knowing exactly who she is. Richard scoffed. Don't be so sensitive. This is business, not a social justice seminar. Maya, who had been quietly typing on her tablet, looked up. I've just informed our PR team to prepare a statement about the termination of acquisition talks. Would you like to review it before it goes out, Marcus? You're bluffing, Richard said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Your board won't let you walk away from this deal. Your shareholders will revolt. Marcus smiled thinly. Actually, our acquisition agreement includes a morality clause that gives me unilateral authority to terminate if there's evidence of discriminatory behavior or cultural incompatibility. Paragraph 47, Section B, your lawyers should have flagged it. Thomas Whitmore flipped frantically through the document in front of him, finding the clause Marcus referenced. "He's right, Richard. It's here in black and white." Richard stood abruptly. "This is absurd. You're willing to throw away months of work over a single comment?" He walked to the fire and told me everything I need to know about how you'd treat Horizon's employees, 40% of whom are people of color. Marcus's voice remained calm. "And it's not just the comment. It's how your family reacted to it. Only your brother showed any discomfort." Catherine Whitmore's carefully maintained composure cracked. "You people are always so quick to play the race card. This is why—" "Stop talking, Kathleen," Thomas interrupted sharply. "You're making it worse." Richard Jr. finally put down his phone. "Dad, our stock will tank if this falls through. We've already told key investors the deal was done." The reality of the situation was beginning to dawn on Richard Sr. His face paled slightly as he calculated the financial implications. "Marcus, perhaps we can discuss this privately. I'm sure we can come to some understanding." "There's nothing to discuss," Marcus replied. "Our due diligence apparently missed some critical cultural red flags at Whitmore Technologies. I'm correcting that mistake now." Richard's expression hardened. "You'll regret this. The industry is smaller than you think. People talk." "Yes, they do," Marcus agreed. "And by this afternoon they'll be talking about how Whitmore Technologies lost a $750 million zero-cents lifeline because its CEO couldn't refrain from making racist comments to the daughter of the man who was about to save his failing company." As if on cue, Marcus's phone chimed with an incoming call. "That will be my board. I need to inform them of my decision." He turned to Maya. "Please show the Whitmores out. Their visitor badges will be deactivated when they leave the building." Richard's face contorted with rage. "You can't treat us like this. Do you know who we are? The Whitmore name has meant something in Silicon Valley since before you were shining shoes." The comment hung in the air, confirming everything Marcus had said. Thomas closed his eyes in defeat, knowing his brother had just hammered the final nail in their company's coffin. Security personnel appeared at the door, summoned by Maya's discreet text. "Gentlemen, please escort the Whitmore family to the lobby," Marcus instructed calmly. "Mr. Thomas Whitmore is welcome to remain if he wishes to discuss potential future partnerships separately." As security approached, Richard seemed to deflate, the reality of what had just happened finally sinking in. His wife clutched her designer handbag nervously, while their son stared at Marcus with a mixture of shock and growing comprehension. "This isn't over," Richard said as he was led toward the door. "Actually, it is," Marcus replied, already turning his attention to his phone as the board call connected. The Whitmore family's exit was captured by the conference room security cameras, their expressions a study in privileged outrage colliding with consequences. What they didn't know was that this was just the beginning of their downfall. Phase 4, the revelation. As the Whitmores were escorted through Horizon's lobby, employees watched curiously. Security had been discreet, but word traveled fast. Thomas Whitmore had chosen to stay behind, separating himself from his family's disgrace. In the elevator descending to the ground floor, Richard Whitmore Sr. furiously punched numbers on his phone, leaving voicemails for his attorneys and financial advisors. His wife stood rigidly beside him, her face a mask of cold fury. Richard Jr. appeared genuinely shaken, the reality of their suddenly precarious situation beginning to sink in. "This is nothing," Richard Sr. assured his family. "A hiccup. Johnson's bluffing. He'll call by the end of the day begging to renegotiate. He can't walk away from our technology." The security guards remained professionally silent as they escorted the family to the street where their driver waited. As they approached the car, a commotion caught their attention. News vans were pulling up, reporters already gathering with cameras and microphones. "What the hell is this?" Richard demanded. Catherine grabbed her husband's arm. "Richard, look!" She pointed to her phone screen, where a news alert had just appeared. "Breaking: Horizon Innovations terminates $750, 0 cents after CEO's racist incident." "Impossible," Richard whispered. "It's only been minutes." As if in response, all their phones chimed simultaneously with an incoming email. It was from Horizon's PR department, addressed to all employees, investors, and press contacts. Horizon Innovations announces immediate termination of acquisition talks with Whitmore Technologies following unacceptable discriminatory comments by Whitmore CEO Richard Whitmore toward a member of the Horizon family. Horizon remains committed to building technology in an environment of respect, inclusion, and dignity for all. A second email followed moments later, this one from the New York Stock Exchange, informing the Whitmores that trading in Whitmore Technologies stock had been temporarily halted due to pending news. As reporters noticed the family, they surged forward, shouting questions. "Mr. Whitmore, did you make racist comments during the meeting?" Was the deal already in trouble before today? How will Whitmore Technologies survive without this acquisition? The family's driver hurriedly opened the car door, but before they could escape, a sleek black government vehicle pulled up alongside them. The window lowered to reveal a stern-faced African-American woman in her 50s. "Mr. Whitmore," she called. "Jacqueline Porter, Undersecretary for Business Development at Commerce. We need to discuss the federal contracts contingent on your merger with Horizon. Those contracts are now under immediate review." Richard's face drained of color. The federal contracts represented 30% of Whitmore's forward revenue projections. Catherine clutched her husband's arm. "Richard, who is that? What contracts?" But Richard was staring at his phone, which had begun ringing constantly. Board members, investors, partners, all demanding explanations. Inside Horizon Tower, Marcus Johnson had just finished his call with the board, who had unanimously backed his decision. He walked into his office where Camille waited with Patricia Chen. "Dad? I'm so sorry," Camille began. "I didn't mean to cause—" Marcus enveloped his daughter in a hug. "You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. What happened in there is exactly why I wanted you to see the business world as it truly is, both the good and the bad." Patricia handed Marcus a tablet. "Sir, you should see this. It's trending on every platform." The screen showed a security camera feed from the lobby where Thomas Whitmore was giving an impromptu press statement. "As CTO of Whitmore Technologies, I want to personally apologize for the inexcusable comments made by my brother. His views do not represent our company's values or my own. I am immediately calling for an emergency board meeting to discuss leadership changes at Whitmore Technologies." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. Thomas is making his move. Will it save their company?" Camilla asked. "Possibly," Marcus replied. "But not their reputation or their stock price, at least in the short term." Patricia's phone rang. After a brief conversation, she turned to Marcus. "Sir, the Labor Secretary is on the line for you. He says it's urgent." Marcus nodded, taking the call on speakerphone. "Mr. Secretary, thank you for calling." "Marcus, I've just been briefed on what happened," came the authoritative voice of the Labor Secretary. "The President asked me to call you personally. He wants you to know that the federal government stands behind your decision. No company doing business with the United States government should tolerate the kind of behavior you witnessed today." Camille's eyes widened at the mention of the President. "Thank you, Mr. Secretary," Marcus replied. "I appreciate the support. We're also reviewing all federal contracts with Whitmore Technologies effective immediately," the Secretary continued. "The President is considering an executive order strengthening anti-discrimination requirements for government contractors. He'd like your input on that initiative when you have time." "I'd be honored to contribute," Marcus said. After the call ended, Maya entered with a tablet, displaying real-time news coverage. The business channels were in full crisis mode, with headlines scrolling across the screen. "Whitmore stock in free fall after failed Horizon deal. Investors demand Richard Whitmore's resignation. Tech in stride leaders comment Whitmore's comment." A financial analyst was speaking urgently. "This is unprecedented. Whitmore Technologies was already vulnerable before this deal fell through. Without Horizon's capital and distribution network, they're facing a liquidity crisis within quarters, not years." Camille watched the coverage with a mixture of awe and discomfort. "Dad, I never meant for all this to happen." Marcus placed his hand on her shoulder. "You didn't cause this, Cammy. Richard Whitmore did. All you did was serve water and maintain your dignity when faced with prejudice. I couldn't be prouder of you." Maya's phone chimed with a message. "Sir, Thomas Whitmore is requesting a private meeting with you immediately. He says he has a proposal." Marcus considered this for a moment. "Tell him I'll see him in 20 minutes. And Maya, contact our friends at Tempest Ventures. I think they might be interested in a restructured deal with Whitmore Technologies under new leadership." The pieces were already realigning on the chessboard, and Marcus Johnson was several moves ahead. What had begun as a routine acquisition signing had transformed into a watershed moment not just for two companies, but for an industry with a long history of exclusion. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Horizon Tower lobby as Richard Whitmore Sr. attempted to re-enter the building. The security desk stopped him, politely but firmly explaining that his access had been revoked. His demands to see Marcus Johnson were met with professional detachment. Richard's face, normally controlled in public, twisted with rage as he was denied entry to a building he had expected to be walking into as a wealthy man with a secured future. "Do you know who I am?" he demanded, his voice rising. "I'm Richard Whitmore." "Yes, sir. That's precisely why you're not permitted upstairs," the security officer replied calmly as smartphone cameras captured the scene. Meanwhile, 40 floors above, Thomas Whitmore sat across from Marcus in the CEO's private conference room. Gone was the family dynamic that had dominated the morning's meeting. This was strictly business. "I want to apologize again for my brother's behavior," Thomas began. "It was inexcusable." Marcus nodded. "I appreciate that, but I'm more interested in what you're proposing now." Thomas placed a folder on the table. "I've been quietly working with our board for months. Richard's leadership has been problematic for years. Declining innovation, talent exodus, outdated management practices. Today was the final straw. I have written commitments from board members representing 62% of voting shares to remove Richard and install new leadership." "With yourself as CEO, I presume?" Marcus asked. "As interim CEO only," Thomas clarified. "I'm an engineer, not a business leader. My goal is to stabilize the company, restructure, and find the right leadership going forward." Marcus studied Thomas carefully. "And you think Horizon might still be interested in a restructured deal?" "I think our technology is still valuable, our engineers are still brilliant, and without my brother's perspectives, influencing company culture, we could build something remarkable together." Maya entered with a tablet displaying real-time market data. Whitmore Technologies stock had plummeted 37% before trading was halted. When trading resumed, it had fallen another 15%. The company had lost nearly half its market value in hours. "Your timing is fortunate," Thomas noted grimly, glancing at the numbers. "Another day of this and there won't be much left to save." Marcus made a decision. "I'll need to speak with my board, but I believe we can structure a new deal. Not an acquisition, but a strategic investment with specific governance conditions." "What conditions?" Thomas asked. "Complete leadership change, comprehensive diversity and inclusion programs, transparent pay equity, and Richard and his son must divest all shares and have no involvement whatsoever." Thomas nodded without hesitation. "I can deliver that. Richard knows he's finished in the tech industry after today. With the federal contracts in jeopardy and investors fleeing, he'll take whatever exit he can get." Patricia Chen, who had been quietly taking notes, spoke up. "We should move quickly. Our PR teams can announce the leadership change at Whitmore Technologies and Horizon's potential strategic investment simultaneously. It creates a recovery narrative that might stabilize the stock price." Marcus turned to Maya. "Set up a board call for 5 p.m. and ask Camille to join us. This is an important lesson in crisis management and corporate responsibility." As Thomas left to meet with Whitmore's board members, the real-world consequences of Richard Whitmore's actions continued to unfold across multiple fronts. In Washington, D.C., the Department of Labor announced a comprehensive review of workplace culture at all companies holding federal technology contracts. The hashtag Whitmore disaster was trending nationally, with thousands sharing their own experiences of workplace discrimination. 4 major universities with engineering buildings named after the Whitmore family announced they would be reviewing these naming arrangements in light of recent events. The technology press, which had been preparing to cover a straightforward acquisition, now found itself reporting on a real-time case study in how quickly reputation and shareholder value could be destroyed by discriminatory behavior. By 4 p.m., Richard Whitmore released a statement through a crisis management firm. "I sincerely apologize for comments made during today's meeting that have been misconstrued. My words were addressing a simple accident and carried no discriminatory intent. Nevertheless, I recognize that this incident has become a distraction for Whitmore Technologies. Therefore, I am announcing my immediate retirement as CEO to allow the company to move forward under new leadership. The statement was immediately criticized for its non-apology and attempt to downplay what had occurred. Within minutes, Not Misconstrued was trending as people pointed out the clear meaning of Whitmore's original comments. At 5:30 p.m., following Marcus's board call, Horizon and Whitmore Technologies released a joint statement. Horizon Innovations and Whitmore Technologies announce a new path forward following today's leadership change at Whitmore. Thomas Whitmore has been appointed interim CEO of Whitmore Technologies, with Richard Whitmore and Richard Whitmore Jr. stepping down from all roles and divesting their ownership stakes. Horizon Innovations is exploring a strategic investment in Whitmore Technologies under its new leadership, with a focus on culture change, technological innovation, and inclusive business practices. The markets responded immediately. Whitmore's stock, which had lost nearly 50% of its value, recovered 22%. In after-hours trading, Horizon's stock, which had dipped slightly on news of the failed acquisition, rose 4% as investors approved of Marcus Johnson's principled stand and strategic flexibility. In his office, Marcus watched the real-time reactions with Camille. "Dad, did you plan all this?" she asked, amazed at how quickly everything had transformed. Marcus smiled. "No one could plan this exact scenario, but I did have contingency plans for any deal breakdown. And I've known for months that Thomas Whitmore was the real technological genius in the family, not his brother." "So we're still getting their technology, just at a better price and without the toxic leadership?" "Good. That's the plan. We'll pay significantly less for an investment stake than the full acquisition would have cost, and instead of inheriting a problematic culture that we'd have to change, we get to help build a new one from the ground up." Maya entered with breaking news. "Sir, the Labor Secretary just announced on CNN that the President is establishing a new Corporate Culture and Inclusion Advisory Council to develop best practices for federal contractors. He's asking you to serve as the inaugural chairperson." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That was quick." "It seems your stand today resonated at the highest levels," Maya replied. The secretary said it was, quote, "a watershed moment that demonstrated moral leadership in corporate America." Patricia added, "Our social media metrics are extraordinary. Horizon's public perception positive rating has increased 27% in the last 3 hours. We've received over 5,000 job applications since the news broke." As the crisis response continued, the most poignant moment came unexpectedly. A knock at the office door revealed Janet Williams, one of the catering staff who had been present during the morning's confrontation. "Mr. Johnson, I hope I'm not interrupting," she said tentatively. "Not at all, Janet. What can I do for you?" Janet twisted her hands nervously. "I just wanted to say thank you. I've served in that conference room for 7 years. The things I've heard, the way people like the Whitmores talk when they think service staff are invisible." She looked at Camille. "What happened to you today has happened to many of us, but no one ever did anything about it. Until your father." Getting out, Camille moved forward and hugged the older woman. "Thank you for saying that." After Janet left, Marcus stood at his office window, looking out over San Francisco as twilight approached. The day had begun with a straightforward business transaction and transformed into something much more significant. One family's fortune and legacy had been destroyed by their own prejudice, while new possibilities had emerged from the ruins. "This is why principles matter in business," he told Camille quietly. "Not just because it's right, but because character and culture determine long-term success. Remember that when you're running your own company someday." The sun set over San Francisco Bay as father and daughter watched in silence, the city lights beginning to twinkle below. A chapter had closed, but the real story was just beginning. 3 months later, the Wall Street Journal headline read, "Horizon-Whitmore Partnership Transforms Industry, How Crisis Led to Innovation Breakthrough." Marcus Johnson stood at the podium in Horizon's newly renovated auditorium, addressing an audience of employees, investors, and media. The company's quarterly earnings report had exceeded all expectations, and the strategic investment in the restructured Whitmore Technologies, now rebranded as Quantum Circuit Innovations, was being hailed as a masterclass in corporate strategy. 3 months ago, we faced a choice between accepting discrimination or standing on principle, Marcus began. Today's results prove that ethical leadership and business success are not opposing forces, they're complementary. The numbers on the screen behind him told the story. Horizon's stock up 32% since the incident, new federal contracts worth $1.00, $2 billion, and job applications increased by 215%. Thomas Whitmore, now permanent CEO of Quantum Circuit Innovations, after a successful interim period, stood to join Marcus on stage. The two leaders shook hands to enthusiastic applause. Our partnership has accomplished in 90 days what might have taken years under the previous structure, Thomas acknowledged. By integrating Horizon's inclusive culture with our engineering expertise, we've accelerated innovation while creating a workplace where talent from all backgrounds can thrive. The transformation of Whitmore Technologies had been remarkable. Under Thomas's leadership and with Horizon's guidance, the company had implemented comprehensive diversity initiatives, transparent pay equity structures, and modern governance. The toxic culture that had festered under Richard Whitmore's leadership was being systematically dismantled. As for Richard Whitmore Sr., his fall had been swift and complete. After his forced resignation and divestiture of shares, further revelations emerged about a pattern of discriminatory practices throughout his tenure. Former employees came forward with stories that painted a damning picture of the culture he had fostered. The financial consequences were devastating. Richard's net worth had declined by over 60% as Whitmore stock plummeted before the Horizon investment partially stabilized it. Several board seats and honorary positions at universities and cultural institutions were withdrawn. The family's name was removed from buildings at 3 engineering schools. But perhaps the most telling indicator of Richard's fall from grace came from within his own family. Catherine Whitmore had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and the public humiliation she had endured. Richard Jr., facing his own reckoning as screenshots of offensive text messages he had sent about Horizon employees surfaced, had checked into a wellness center for what his representatives called reflection and personal growth. 6 months later, Camille Johnson stood nervously backstage at the National Merit Scholars Ceremony in Washington, D.C. As the youngest ever recipient of the Presidential Innovation Fellowship, she was about to address 500 of the nation's top young minds. "You ready?" Marcus asked, straightening his daughter's blazer. "I think so," Camille replied, reviewing her notes one last time. "I still don't understand why they asked me. I haven't even started at MIT yet." Marcus smiled. "Because your experience catalyzed a national conversation about corporate culture, diversity in tech, and ethical leadership. That water pitcher you picked up changed an industry." The incident that had begun with Richard Whitmore's cruel comment had indeed sparked unexpected change throughout the business world. The Corporate Culture and Inclusion Advisory Council that Marcus now chaired had developed new guidelines for federal contractors that were being hailed as the most significant advancement in workplace equity standards in decades. Major tech companies had rushed to enhance their own diversity initiatives, eager to avoid becoming the next Whitmore disaster. Venture capital firms were increasingly evaluating company culture and leadership ethics as risk factors in investment decisions. The Johnson Standards, as they had become known, were being adopted by companies far beyond the tech industry. These principles emphasized that diversity and inclusion weren't just social goods, but essential components of business success and risk management. As Camille took the stage to a standing ovation, she saw her father watching proudly from the wings. Her speech began, not with her accomplishments, but with a simple story about offering to pour water in a conference room. "I learned that day that one moment of truth can change everything," she told the audience. "Not because of what happens to you, but because of how you respond to it." 1 year later, the anniversary of what the business press now called the Whitmore incident was marked by the publication of a Harvard Business School case study, Principles and Profit, the Horizon Decision. Marcus Johnson sat in his home office, reading the final printed version that would be taught to thousands of MBA students. The case study concluded with a powerful statement: by refusing to tolerate discrimination, even at significant potential financial cost, Marcus Johnson not only protected his company's culture, but ultimately created greater shareholder value through a more advantageous deal structure, enhanced reputation, and strengthened governmental relationships. The case demonstrates that ethical leadership can be the most profitable business strategy of all. On his desk sat a framed photograph taken at MIT's campus a few months earlier, Camille in her freshman year. standing proudly beside the newly established Johnson Center for Ethical Leadership in Technology. The center, funded by Horizon, would ensure that future technology leaders understood the business case for inclusive practices and ethical decision-making. Marcus's phone rang. Thomas Whitmore calling with exciting news about a breakthrough in their quantum computing project. The partnership born from crisis had evolved into one of the most productive collaborations in the industry. As Marcus took the call, he glanced at the water pitcher he kept on his desk, the same one Camille had used that fateful day. He had kept it as a reminder that principles, not power or money, were the true foundation of lasting success. In Silicon Valley, a new generation of leaders was emerging, shaped by the lessons of the Whitmore incident. They understood what Richard Whitmore never did, that character is capital, inclusion is innovation, and respect is the most valuable currency in business. The $750 million 0 cents deal that collapsed over a glass of spilled water had ultimately created billions in value, not just financial returns, but the immeasurable worth of a business culture where everyone could contribute their talents without fear or limitation. And it all began because one CEO refused to accept discrimination even when $750 million 0 cents hung in the balance. And if this story inspired you, please like and subscribe. Share your own experiences of standing up to discrimination in the comments below. Remember, one moment of courage can change an entire industry.